Welcome to Precalc Semester Exam 1 Final Review Part 3. Number 16. We're going to go ahead and simplify this, and even though it has I, we're going to treat it like a normal algebraic expression, so we're either going to FOIL or double distribute. So let me do that over. That was hard for you guys to see. Okay, 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 7i is positive 35i. Negative 2i times 3 is negative 6i. And then negative 2i times 7i is negative 14i squared. Okay, it's not letting me write squared there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is combine my like terms. So 15, when I take 35 minus 6i, I get a positive 29i. And don't forget that I squared becomes negative 1. So this becomes negative 14 times negative 1. Okay, which when I simplify that, I get 15 plus 29i. A negative 14 times a negative 1 is a positive 14. And then when I combine those like terms, the 15 and 14, I get 29 plus 29i. Number 17. Simplify 4 minus 3 quantity squared. This does not mean just to square everything inside the parentheses. What it means to do is that you need to write what's there twice. Squared means to multiply by itself. So 4 minus 3i times 4 minus 3i. And now we're going to do the same thing that we did in 16. So we're going to FOIL. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 minus 3i is negative 12i. Negative 3i times 4 is also negative 12i. Let me just draw a line here so we don't get confused. And then negative 3i times negative 3i is a positive 9i squared. Okay, so if I combine these two like terms, I get 16 minus 24i. The I squared becomes a negative 1. Okay, so let's do some more math here. I end up with 16 minus 24i. A 9 times negative 1 is a negative 9. So when I combine these like terms, if I do the 16 minus 9, I end up with, I'm going to put it right up here, I end up with 7 minus 24i. 18 says solve x squared minus 3x minus 28 equals 0. This is a quadratic equation because my highest exponent is squared. You have several options here. You can either factor and solve, or you can use the quadratic equation. I'll show both methods. This one, because the a value is simply 1, it makes it a lot easier to factor. So I'm going to go ahead and use factoring first. So to do that, I take the factors of c. So 1 and 28, 2 and 14, 3 and 7, okay? Those are the only, that's not even right. Not 3 and 7, I'm sorry. I was thinking 27. 2 and 14, 4 and 7, and that's it. Now, how do I do my signs? What you're going to look at is the sign on B. If B is whatever it is, that sign has to go with the bigger number. So down here I'm going to make my bigger numbers negative. Okay? Now, ask yourself, when I'm looking at what it multiplies to, in our case, it's a negative. I already have a negative, so ask yourself, a negative times a what will result in a negative answer? Well, a negative times a positive. So when I add these up, 1 minus 28 is negative 27. 2 minus 14 is negative 12. 4 minus 7 is negative 3. I'm going to pick the one that gives me the B term. So these are my factors. When A is simply 1, it's minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is negative 28, all over 2 times A, which is 1. When you go to do this, only put what's underneath the square root in the calculator not the actual square root. So I'm literally putting in only the piece that I'm about to highlight, okay? The only thing I'm actually putting in the calculator is stuff down here. So I end up with 3 plus or minus the square root of 121 over 2. The square root of 121 is 11, so I have 3 plus or minus 11 over 2. Remember, this plus or minus right here tells me I have two options. I can do 3 plus 11 over 2, and I can also do 3 minus 11 over 2, which when I do the math on these, 14 over 2 is 7. 3 minus 11 is negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4, which are the same two answers we had the first time. Okay, number 19 says find the zeros of 2x to the third plus 14x squared minus 36x. I am going to erase everything in purple here, so if you need it, please pause the video and write it down. Oh, I'll fix that. There's some writing underneath there, not a big deal. Just give me 1 second. There we go. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and look at this. When I am looking at polynomials, my goal is to get it into with the highest exponent of x or x squared, because I know how to solve those easily. You can see I have a degree of x to the third, okay? So what I'm going to do is look for a greatest common factor. And when I look, indeed, I can take out a 2 and an x from each term. So when I look at the first term and say, well, when I divide out a 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. If I had x to the third and I take 1 out, now I'm just left with x squared. Okay? Look at the next term, 14x squared. 14 divided by 2 is a positive 7. If I had x squared and I took 1 out, I'm left with x. Negative 36 divided by 2 is a negative 18. I had 1x, I took it out, so there is no more. Okay, when they say find the zeros, they're going to assume you're going to let f of x or y be 0. So this all equals 0. So I have two options here. I can use the quadratic, or I can use factoring. I'm going to use factoring on this one. So the 2x stays outside. Let's look at our factors of negative 18. I have 1 and 18, 2 and 9, or 3 and 6. Remember what I said. The front sign goes with the bigger number. So 18, 9, and 6 have to be positive. And then you're going to look at what do they have to multiply to? A negative number. So a positive times a negative gives me negative 18. When I do the math, negative 1 plus 18 is 17. Negative 2 plus 9 is 7. Negative 3 plus 6 is 3. So I want to pick the one that gives me this middle term here. Wrong middle term. I apologize. That was before we took out the greatest common factor. Look at the middle term and what we're looking at, 7x. So that tells me I'm going to use these middle ones. So since a is 1, it's just going to be x. I'm going to write minus 2 and x plus 9. Now, once I have it broken down where things are being multiplied and equaling 0, I can take each one and set them equal to 0, each multiple. Okay? And remember, zeros are just another way of saying roots, solutions, zeros, where your x-intercepts, where it crosses the x-axis. So I have 2x equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0, x plus 9 equals 0. And when I solve these, I get 3 zeros. X equals 0. When I add 2, I get x equals 2. And when I subtract 9, I get x equals negative 9. I'm going to change the page. If you need to write this down, please pause the video. Find the factors of f of x equals x to the fourth plus 2x to the third minus 9x squared minus 2x plus 8, given that x plus 4 and x minus 2 are factors. Okay, so let me flip forward here. It looks like we're missing our graph here. That's okay. I'll fix that in a minute. Let's look at 20. So I'm actually going to make space here for 20. We'll come back to 21. So this is when we went and did that whole synthetic division stuff. So if I know that x plus 4 is a factor, then I subtract 4, so I know x would have to equal negative 4. So I can pull out a negative 4 using synthetic division. Remember, I make sure the exponents go in order. So 4, 3, 2, 1, none. I'm not missing any. And now I'm just going to look at the numbers and the coefficients, the numbers in front. So x to the fourth has a 1, x to the third has a 2, x squared has -9, x has -2, and then lastly 8. Synthetic division says you bring the first number down. Any number on the bottom you multiply. So -4 times 1 is -4, and then you add. And then you repeat. -4 times -2 is +8. You add, and I'm left with -1. -4 times -1 is 4. You add, and I'm left with 2. -4 times 2 is -8. You add, and I get 0. Now, what does this leave me with? Remember, these are your coefficients. You'd start 1 degree less, so it won't be x to the fourth. It will be 1x to the third minus 2x squared minus 1x plus 2. And remember, this is your remainder, which should be 0 since I knew it was a factor. The reason they give us 2 factors is because I'm still not down to a quadratic or a linear equation where x simply just x is to the first power or second power. I can't solve this yet. And they don't really want you to solve it, they just want the factors. Okay, so we use this one. Now let's look here. I take this x minus 2 and I set it equal to 0. And it's telling me to use 2 in synthetic division. And I'm going to use these coefficients now. So 1, -2, -1, 2. Same process, bring it down. 2 times 1 is 2. Add them, I get 0. 2 times 0 is 0. Add them, I get -1. 2, remember, all I'm doing is this, multiplying. 2 times -1 is -2. And when I add them, I get 0. Now, my last polynomial was x to the third, so my next one is going to be 1x squared plus 0x minus 1. Okay? So they want me to factor this. The only options for 1 are 1 times 1. 1 will have to be, they have to equal 0. So 1 will be positive and 1 will be negative. So I get x plus 1 and x minus 1. So these aren't my only factors. Technically, if I wrote it out as a factored form, they gave me up top x plus 4. They gave me x minus 2. And we found x plus 1 and x minus 1. So this is the same as the original function. It's just in factored form. This is the end of part 3. Part 4 will be posted soon.